Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here to discuss all things LSU football, LSU spring football, with the OGs, with Wilson Alexander and with Scott Rabalais, who yet again has busted out a sweater vest, ready to go golfing.
Hey, I'm right there with him, man. This golf weather, this is the perfect weather for it.
We'll turn you guys loose in an hour, and you can go cut loose on Webble Beach here before long. But before that, we will get into obviously a huge piece of news, a little bit of surprising piece of news, which is the LSU men's basketball team fired a cannon shot on Wednesday night. They take care of Kentucky. They upset Kentucky on a buzzer beater by Tyrell Ward. Right there at the end in the PMAC. And so we will discuss all those things. We are here to discuss it all. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Doing well. Like we said, this is great golf weather. I think Rab and I would probably rather be out there at the moment, actually.
It's a beautiful afternoon.
No offense to you, Perryn. We enjoy
None
your company,
taken.
but this week has been great for that. So doing well and looking forward to spring football gearing up in just a couple weeks, too.
If we were all in college, no matter what campus you went to college, this would be one of those things where you prayed that the professor said, "Hey, let's go have class outside tonight," and do something where probably the professor, him or herself, probably wasn't even that much invested in whatever course they were invested in whatever curriculum they were trying to put
class outside
forward.
Never went well.
No, well, it went well as far as I was concerned as a student, because then you could just sort of kick back and enjoy the day and enjoy being a young person, but. Anyhow, we are here to discuss LSU sports first and foremost, but a bit of business as always. We are here every Monday and Thursday here with the LSU Sports Insider on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe there. You can catch us live there. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And please get a hold of our LSU newsletter. We're about to start talking spring football practice, because that's about to get underway here in a little more than 2 weeks. And so with that, every single sport under the sun will be going on at the LSU campus: men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, baseball, gymnastics, all of it going on all at the same time. So stay up to date with all of it with our LSU newsletter. That's a daily newsletter. Rab handles that 3 times a week personally, though. So sign up. Please go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. As I said, we are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the finer podcasts are found. And we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL, financial member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, we were going to start originally when we sort of mapped out this podcast. We were going to start with a sort of a spring football preview, but the LSU men have sprinkled some news. The LSU news fairy has sprinkled some dust on us, and we need to address that first. It was an electric night in the PMAC, if I don't mind saying. LSU 75, Kentucky 74. The Tigers, of course, win via upset for the second time in a row over a top 25 team, this time at home. Rab, the LSU men certainly seem to they don't seem to be comfortable unless they're behind by double digits in the first half, and then they got to dig their way out. Just generally speaking, before we get deep into it, just your sort of 2 cents on where these guys have sort of sprung forth and made a name for themselves over the past 2 games.
Yeah, they had a lot of close losses. Before these last 2 games. They had lost 7 of their previous 9, and 3 of those were by 4 points.
3 of them were, that's right, 1 or 2 possession games.
Really close games, and even in the games where they lost kind of big, like Tennessee and Auburn, they fought back and made it respectable after getting way behind. And that's what they did these last two games. They were down 16 to South Carolina in the second half, came back to win by 1. They were down 15 in the first minute of the second half last night against Kentucky and came back to win by 1. Which says what? It says that maybe they're becoming more of a team. You know, we're here late in the season. They're finding a way to win instead of just being competitive. It's clearly a better team in Matt McMahon's second year in terms of talent. Not a Final Four roster. It's not UConn or anything like that.
Not even an NCAA tournament roster. Probably.
No, it's not. But it's a better team, and they're competitive, and they certainly don't give up. John Calipari said after the game last night, he said, I told my guys, Kentucky was up 11 at the half. He said, I told my players they're going to make a run. We have to counter their run. And then that's exactly what happened. After Kentucky got up 15, LSU stormed all the way back, and then it was a very close game, either side the rest of the way, a thrilling game. But, you could say LSU was lucky to win these last two games, but at the same time, winning teams make their own luck, and they maybe deserved some after all these close losses. So where are they right now? I think they're a team that you could say, I'm just about ready to say that they should make the NIT field.
Yeah,
the NCAA field would require them.
They're one game under in conference
run,
play, so that would stand. They were NET 88 net ranking.
Yeah, 85.
going at that right, and then they're 85.
So they didn't get much of a bump. But the thing to remember is the top two teams this year. New rules for the NIT. Top two teams not in the NCAA tournament from a conference in terms of the net will get in the NIT field automatically.
Right.
And right now LSU would be one of those teams.
And whereas it used to be I'm just going to pick a conference. Let's just say the Southland Conference. Said McNeese wins the regular season Southland
Interesting
Conference
team to
championship.
pick.
Yeah. Well, McNeese wins the regular season Southland Conference championship and then loses somewhere in the tournament. Well, in previous years, the NIT would automatically take the regular season champion from a conference like that. But that's not the case anymore.
Correct.
And so the NIT is a little bit more free to take, one of these power conference teams that are maybe finish 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th the conference and just barely miss the cut. LSU certainly is my goodness, even if LSU were to win out, just to put this on the record, even if LSU were to win out throughout the regular season, which they're probably not going to do anyway, and make a decent run in the SEC tournament, just by virtue of the fact that they don't have any more quad 1 wins that are attainable, it's very, 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 very unlikely that they would make the NCAA tournament. But it doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that they can't make the NIT. It also doesn't mean that Matt McMahon, again, as we said in the previous podcast when Sheldon Mickles was here, our LSU men's basketball beat writer, it doesn't mean that this is not a discernible sign of progress being made in Matt McMahon's second year. They went 2-16 in conference last season. And so, no, they don't have the guns necessarily to go against Alabama or, for that matter, Tennessee or some of these other, more established programs that have had coaches in place for a longer amount of time. But it doesn't mean that they aren't making progress as a program under Matt McMahon in his second year. Am I going too far in saying so?
No, I think clearly. 2 conference wins last year. They have 6 so far at this point, and 5 games that they certainly have a chance to win. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. They're probably not going to win them all down the stretch, but they certainly have a chance to win and probably should win most of them. And then you go in the SEC tournament. If you can win a game or two, let's say reasonably they win 3 out of the last 5, and they split a couple of games in the tournament that puts them at 18 wins. I think that with the right net number, that'll give them in the NIT, and that would be progress. Then you got to build on that for next year. Right. You don't want to be in this position next year. Next year, you want to say, okay, make the NCAA tournament, LSU, and get back to there. I don't. I've always had this opinion about LSU basketball forever, and usually LSU basketball, it's been the highs or the lows. It's either they're in the Final Four
Absolute
with the greatest players of all
coaster.
time, or they're last in the SEC.
And just to put a finer point on, particularly in the last 25 years, they go in 2000, they go to the Sweet 16. And then after that, the weight of the NCAA sanctions, all of a sudden they've got a roster that's got nothing left. 2006, they go to the Final Four. Then they've got nothing left. It was like that. And it's been like that over the past 25 years where there's no continuity.
A lot of feast or famine. While you have to say under Dale Brown, and Dale has his supporters and his detractors, they went to the postseason 15 straight years.
Right.
And when there were smaller fields with the NCAA and the NIT a lot of those years. So you have to say all those years really. So you have to say LSU can do that. LSU can be LSU's goal should be in the postseason every year.
Yes, and should.
The NCAA or NIT. I think that's reasonable. And once in a while, you can make a run. I think those are reasonable goals for LSU to have in basketball. You know, LSU's got the second most SEC championships of any school.
Sure.
It's in Kentucky.
Sure,
Regular
behind
season
Kentucky.
titles. I mean,
It's hard to tell young people that. But,
yeah,
you know, that there's
the tradition
is
not it's not bare. You
right.
know,
There's a certain segment of our readership and our viewership that would absolutely remember LSU as sort of something of a mini powerhouse in men's basketball.
So they can reasonably get back to that level again. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Not that they're foundering along in the bottom third of the conference, but again, this is a year to try to build, and they're showing those signs of progress, which you thought, well, when they lost to Nicholls State back in November, that wasn't going to be the case. But now it's starting to look like it could be the case. This could be they're at least a compelling team to watch down the stretch to see how far they can go.
And they play hard. And, you know, what do we love
Definitely.
to say in our business, right? What do we like to say? The mark of a good coach is that the team gets better and better as the year goes on. And that certainly seems to be the case with this team under Matt McMahon.
Both these wins without Jalen Cook, by the way. He's missed both these
That's
games
correct.
with an
Yes,
injury. So.
and that's not, you know, we thought they were. Well, I don't want to speak for you, Rab, but I certainly I don't mind telling you that I sort of thought that they were really kind of dead in the water if Jalen Cook had not been ruled to be able to be eligible earlier this season, and if he had not been available to play on this team. I thought he was going to be automatically the best player, and he probably, you know, he might still be the best player. But the fact of the matter is, I did not think that there was any circumstance in which they would win against South Carolina on the road, certainly, and then go on ahead and defeat Kentucky straight up at home in the PMAC. So good for them. Tyrell Ward, 17 points, Jordan Wright and Jalen Reed, 13 points apiece. And they get it done. They erase a 15-point deficit. Again, they just they don't seem to be comfortable unless they're going to be back double digits going into the second half. So
one of the best points was Tyrell Ward. He made the shot at one, and he ran towards the student section. And Angel Reese was one of the first people onto the court, and she grabbed him around the neck. And he had no idea who it was that she had grabbed. He said it was a blur. Man, I don't remember anything. And then she said, "I got knocked down, but it was great." I'm thinking Kim Mulkey probably didn't think that was so great that you got knocked down in the
but I mean,
court storming.
Isn't that what's great about a college campus though, and about being that age and all that kind of stuff? You know, Angel Reese is an international celebrity, and yet she can still get caught up in being a 20-year-old.
But I'm glad she
college
didn't get hurt.
kid. I use kid in quotations, and I'm sure quite certainly that Kim is happy that she didn't get bowled over in such a place like Caitlin Clark did earlier this season against Ohio State. So anyhow, we will leave it there. One more thing before we move on to spring football. Rab, just sort of what do you see from the LSU men's basketball team as they go down the road here, down the stretch, and who they've got coming up? Frankly, they're through the most difficult part of their schedule. It's not to say that any of these games coming up are easy, but they'll finish up with, they're going to go to Vanderbilt on the road and Arkansas on the road, and those places are never easy. But you've
Home
got
games against Georgia and Missouri. Miss State this Saturday. It was a good team.
Right, that's right.
It was a good team. They beat Ole Miss last night. But yeah, this last 5 games was a meat grinder. Tennessee, Auburn, Florida away from home, at South Carolina, who obviously is a surprise this year, and then Kentucky. So this next 5 is not that, but there's still a couple of tough games. Yeah, like I said, if you could split those 2 games on the road, and if you could take care of business at home, and go 4-1, that would really be something. But that maybe, like I said, still tap the brakes a little bit. But they have the chance to do that.
But NIT, one way or the other. You're talking about going from 2 conference wins last year to however many conference wins they find themselves finishing with this year. That's a sign of progress. And I'll be real frank with you, Rab. I don't mind telling you that I wasn't so sure that we were seeing that kind of progress from Matt McMahon's program up until the last couple of weeks. God bless him for playing hard, but playing hard doesn't really feed the Bulldogs, so to speak. And so they are. This is a sign of real progress, in my opinion.
It is, and now you have to do something with it because there's still 2 1-point wins. That could have gone the other way.
That's right.
We're not
and
having
that
this
sequence
conversation.
was not a thing of beauty, incidentally. That final sequence that LSU had, that final possession.
Matt McMahon made a joke after it. So they're not sending this tape of the end of the game to their coach's clinic because he didn't call timeout. He said, "I wanted the chaos. I wanted Kentucky's defense to be scrambling."
That's an old Bobby Knight thing, where they say don't take a timeout because then you're allowing the other team to be able to set their defense as well. So. No, I thought that was the right call, but certainly was not. I'm quite certain that last sequence was not how Matt McMahon drew it up.
No. The block shot for Jordan Wright, and then he just shot puts it over towards Terrell Ward, who just makes this incredible athletic, instinctive play just to grab the ball and put it up and put it in for the win.
And tip of the cap to Jordan Wright, too, for being able to sort of keep that ball in play as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So,
it came right back in his face.
Well, so some things do work out, and maybe LSU is due for one. But as we move forward, we will turn our attention to practice. We're talking about practice. We're talking about LSU spring practice.
We would have done this for the entire podcast if it weren't for the team winning
that's right.
the men's basketball team winning last night.
So high marks for Matt McMahon. Spring football practice begins on March 5th, which sounds like a good ways off, but gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, as you know,
less than 2 weeks.
That's right. It's less than 2 weeks away. It's almost upon us, and the spring game will be April 13th. So it's about a month plus for the full spring program that Brian Kelly's got going on. We will start here and just say, look, okay, after the signing period, we know that the LSU football team is going to have to do a little bit of roster management, so to speak. But where does the roster stand now in terms of number of scholarships over and maybe some holes they're going to have to fill as they go down the road?
Oh, well, in terms of the exact number of scholarships, I think
we don't know for sure, but yes.
Yeah, I think it's like 88 or 89. There's some obviously now a question mark with like Trey Holly. Is he going to be on the team going into next season? And so the exact number is somewhere in that range. So they're a few over. And as we've discussed before, they're going to be looking to add defensive tackle depth after we get out of spring practice. That portal opens up on April 15th, 2 days after LSU's spring game. It's open through the end of the month. And in terms of other positions, now maybe, last time I think we talked about football here on the podcast, Rab sort of demanded that they go get a running back. And now that looks like something that is going to definitely be necessary coming out of the spring. LSU's going to go through spring practice with only 2 running backs with Kaleb Jackson and Josh Williams, which they actually did that same thing last year with Trey Holly and Noah Kane because everybody else was out. But it's not a ideal position to be in. They've got other guys walk-ons, but those are the 2 scholarships.
Last year? I'm sorry.
He was injured during the spring. He was coming off some off-season procedures.
Damn, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, and pardon your language, by the way.
Excuse me.
So anyway, probably looking at a running back in that portal window, somebody who can just provide some depth. And then it's defensive tackle, and where else they go is kind of probably dependent on how the spring unfolds.
Yeah. So let's start there in terms of.
So we're devoting today to the offense, right?
I'm sorry.
We're devoting today to the offense. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So starting with that, we will discuss position battles to watch, and since you sort of already touched on that, Wilson, let's talk about the running back position. Kaleb Jackson obviously is sort of. Already a fan favorite, already kind of sort of the people's choice, but there's a little bit more to it than that. Just sort of run us through the running back room as we go into spring ball.
Well, of course, the major development within the last few weeks was Trey Holly getting arrested and now indefinitely suspended. And so with his status, certainly unknown going into this in the spring, and then months down the road, we'll see where the legal process is at that point, because that'll have a large determination in whether or not he's back on the team. Trey, of course, has maintained that he is completely innocent in this shooting case over in Union Parish. LSU, if you take him out of the equation at the moment, LSU's got 3 running backs: Josh Williams, Kaleb Jackson, and incoming freshman Caden Durham. That is not a lot to get through the season with. And maybe
Caden's not coming till the summer. Right?
Yeah, he's not an early enrollee. And so, Kaleb looks like the one who is probably, you hope will make a really big leap going into year 2 with the opportunity for more touches, be able to take advantage of those things. And in those other parts of his game that needed to continue to get fine-tuned, like pass pro in particular, and, catching the ball out of the backfield as well, that will continue to come along here in the spring and going into the summer. So he looks like someone who we saw it in flashes last year could be your RB1 and maybe be one of the better running backs in the SEC. But they like Josh Williams quite a lot because he's so trustworthy. And so I would expect Josh, if you had a depth chart kind of going into spring ball, not what it's going to look like in the against USC, but going into spring ball, I would think it's Josh and then Kaleb Jackson and then Caden Durham penciled in for when he shows up.
Right. a little bit of certainly a different situation that LSU finds itself, at least at the moment that LSU finds itself in. Whereas last year, going into preseason camp, they had 8 scholarship running backs. Now you're talking about 3.
Yeah.
So you need to, again, Rab, you were clairvoyant, whether you realized it or not. They're probably going to have to figure out a way to get at least one more body in there.
Well, this position illustrates the continuing fragility of LSU's team makeup.
Well, of any college football, given any college football team's makeup in this day and age,
sure,
at any position.
But this
right?
is unusually bad. I
Yes.
mean, it's like at a defensive tackle. This is unusually bad. A situation to be in, where they're fortunate. Josh Williams decided to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if he said, "No, I'm going to the NFL," or "I've had enough."
Yeah,
And
he's maximizing it out completely. This is his 6th year.
Right. I mean, so that's a huge break for LSU. So obviously you have to have more numbers. You're going to have 3 guys. You can't count on Trey Holly right now. Maybe he can come back, maybe not. But you have to plan on him not coming back. So you have to go get another running back just to have numbers, because you have to anticipate injury situations. I mean, LSU never gets through the season without a couple of running backs getting banged up. So like just about any
Nor
team.
does any team. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that's got to move forward. I agree with him. Josh Williams is he's like a Swiss Army knife. He can run the ball between the tackles, and he can catch the ball. He can pass block. He can do all those things. But of course, I just love seeing Kaleb Jackson every time he touches the ball. And part of me is kind of, if I may say so, use the word, rooting for him to be the running back, because he's kind of got that. He's like a Leonard Fournette light a little bit. Like, I'd rather run you over than just run around you. And so it's fun to watch. But they got to get better in this in this group and just get more numbers, because it's one of those things that could lead to your downfall if you don't.
And what's interesting about it too is that, as I think maybe we'll get into schematically with the offense this year, you're probably expecting more out of your running back position than you were the last few years. Your yards on the ground are you're not gonna get over 1,000 yards rushing from Garrett Nussmeier. So you, all due respect to Garrett, that's just not his style of game. Right. Like, I think Garrett can give you maybe, I'm trying to set a reasonable number for it, 150 yards on the ground,
something like
this
that.
year.
Sure.
You see him maybe going, like, intentionally go on a keeper around the end or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Running a zone read, and maybe you haven't he hasn't been handing it off all game. He gets the right kind of look. He can pick up probably 20 yards. He's got a little bit of speed to him. Josh Williams told us back at the bowl game that Garrett's been clocked over 20 miles an hour on their GPS system.
But he's never
before.
going to. You can't ever depend on him. No offense, but you can't ever depend on him. Okay, the pocket's crashing, everything's falling apart. Now he busts loose for 45 yards. I mean, it's just not. Jaden Daniels was just so exceptional.
His preference is going to be to check down and find somebody.
Correct.
Josh Williams coming out of the backfield.
We saw it in the bowl game.
Exactly right.
We saw it in the bowl game. I mean, Jaden, Mina Kimes of ESPN, I guess, was watching some of Jaden's film recently and said that instantly he enters the NFL as a top 5 dual threat quarterback. Mm-hmm. So when you have that off of your team, you're going to have to get a lot more from these running backs, next year. And so, we're talking about, it might not even be that relevant who's technically RB1 at the start, especially at the start of the season, who takes the first snap. I mean, gosh, this last year, Trey Bradford took the first snap at running back. Right. Who would have had that on their bingo card last year? And because there's going to be a lot of touches for these guys to go around and split them up. But because there are more touches that you're probably expecting to get out of your running backs, and that you're going to need from them to produce more than they did last year, then you definitely need the bodies to get through this season, because you're going to be putting a little bit more wear and tear on them potentially.
This is where it's going to be interesting to see with Mike Denbrock also gone as offensive coordinator, and now Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton sharing the duties, but Joe Sloan in the press box calling the plays. How much more will they rely on the short passing game as running game? What will their style be? I saw a lot of that. It was small sample size, but I saw a lot of that in the ReliaQuest Bowl. A lot of short passes, and it's like, when is he going to throw long? And finally, they did late, more late in the game. But I saw a lot of that, and I could see that being, because they got a lot of receivers and they've got a lot of tight ends. So you could have a lot of targets there for Nussmeier if he can be accurate enough to supplement the running game in that way. They're not going to have 1,000. Jaden was a 1,000-yard rusher. They're not going to have a 1,000-yard rusher on this team.
In all likelihood.
If they do, I would probably guess Kaleb Jackson would be it.
Correct.
You would.
Correct.
That's a bold statement. I like that.
I would I'm going to put it to you like this. It wouldn't surprise me if Josh Williams were the starter on opening night. And really, even for that matter, in many games, but it also wouldn't surprise me if actually if Kaleb Jackson weren't the leading rusher one way or the other.
Boy, I bet they wish they had Durham coming in the spring, obviously, for a lot of reasons. Fortunately, of course, it's traditionally been the one program, the position, not the one position, but one of the positions where you can have a crash course and get somebody.
That's correct.
A freshman can play early at running back.
Right.
Right.
So
That helps.
once you getting him in, it would be the reason you would want to get him in the spring is just because you have 2 scholarship running backs and you would like to be able to spread the touches around. I remember talking to Noah Kane last year in the spring, and he was kind of exhausted because of how much they were getting. He was like, "This is great because I need the touches to show what I can do," but man, they were getting beat up a little bit.
Yeah, they were getting worn out. We will before we get to tight ends, because that is going to be sort of an interesting spot. Well, 2 things before we get into into the tight end position. Let's talk about what we expect from, or what we think we might, what we think we should probably expect from Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton as play callers, as sort of orchestrators of the offense. This is their first chance to really be able to show what they've got. As co-coordinators, just how much can we really discern from spring practice, and what do we expect to see in spring practice?
Last year, in the middle of the spring, it became very apparent that LSU was trying to stretch the passing game vertically. Obviously, there was talk about it during the season, but there was more tangible ways that was happening. You could start to see that in conversations with players, and I remember in a press conference with Mike Dimbrock, and also just kind of being able to see some of what was going on. You could tell that was a main focus of spring practice, and it ended up playing out over the season.
At that point, that was the one missing thing from Jaden Daniels' game.
Exactly. And so, you can begin to see maybe what this offense will look like to some degree. It's still going to be, vanilla in the spring. But I think we can start to get some indication of how are they using the running backs. Is the running game going to have any more variety to it? It was so much inside zone and zone read last year. Are they going to start to try to, stretch some runs outside the tackle box a little bit more often? I think those sorts of things will start to come through. And I think that's one of the things I expect to see, or maybe think I will see from Sloan and as the primary play callers, that this playbook is still probably going to be kind of what it has been the last few years. It's under Brian Kelly. It's not. I don't expect like wholesale changes like we going from 2018 LSU to 2019 LSU with Joe Brady and the RPOs and all that sort of thing, where it's like such a significant change. I expect it to be more subtle, but also because of the who's looking at the playbook is different, and who the personnel is different. Like we've already talked about, without Jaden here, the running game is going to be something to keep an eye on all offseason. What is that? What are they able to get out of that, and how are they able to produce in the run game? How are they able to use the tight ends in the intermediate and short passing game as more of an outlet? I think that we can start to see some of those things here in the spring and start to get a sense of Garrett's handle of the offense as well.
So we talked about obviously we talked about the running backs. We talked about how the offense may look different. One of the things that we suspect, we don't know for sure just yet, but we know that Brian Kelly offense likes to be able to utilize the tight end as much as it can within the confines of the personnel it has. We know about Mason Taylor, sort of a known entity. Where can LSU sort of expand on offense using the personnel that it will have coming in addition to Mason Taylor, in addition to what they already had on the roster to begin with, and maybe can just sort of develop a little bit more?
Well, they certainly can. This is an intriguing spring for these tight ends and into the summer, because like Trades Green isn't an early enrollee. But you've got Mason Taylor, like we said, coming back. You use that word known commodity, and he is in some ways because of what he did as a freshman. But he had he was so overshadowed in the offense by Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and even Kyron Lacey to a degree that he kind of disappeared in some ways his sophomore year. So this is a
reemerged in the bowl game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We start to see these changes on offense, and that's what leads me to think that we'll see maybe more out of the tight ends, and especially as an outlet, because he had 88 yards. That was a season high. I think he had 7 catches,
I'm
which was
looking it
a
up right
season high
now.
as
I'm
well.
trying
It was
to
either
get to it,
it was 7, 8, or 9. One of those two. One of those three, excuse me. But the
7 catches, 88 yards.
All right,
I'm sorry.
I had it right the first time. And
Encyclopedic knowledge.
and we know that LSU likes 12 personnel, but just didn't ever use it last year really that much because it wasn't necessary. You had these fantastic receivers, and what you have with Jaden, it wasn't really a big element of the offense. So, LSU's also still going to have Connor Gilbreth, who's kind of a run blocking tight end. And then, there will be Mac Markway is kind of another run blocking tight end. We'll see how he develops as a pass catcher. But the two that make it really intriguing, I think, to watch are going to be Kamorian Pimpton and Trey'Dez Green, because those guys are potential mismatches. Right. Kamorian Pimpton, we watched him in the preseason last year and just said, "Wow, look at what he can do."
I thought he was going to contribute.
There.
Yeah. But then it was one of those things where it's like, once you actually get into he's dominating in 7-on-7, but once you actually get into a football game, there's some differences and there's some things he needed to learn.
But just look at him, his physical size, and Trey'Dez Green is what, 6'7"?
6'7",
around there. Yeah.
I mean, these are guys who can give me a little curl route, put the linebacker or the safety on your back, and try to get around him before he can catch the ball. Mm-hmm. Right here. Like Garrett can put the ball right there, then you've got a 7 or 8 yard gain. You're moving the chains. That's what I think. I could be totally wrong. That's what I think we're going to see a lot of from this offense this year. And these guys have to. It can't just be Mason Taylor. You got to have 2 or 3 guys catch the ball. And if you go 5 wide, there's going to be some tight ends in those 5 wide. For sure.
And especially and something else I would love to see would be Trey'Dez Green up the seams, because he ran so much. He was played more as a wide receiver his senior year at Zachary than he was as an inline tight end.
Trey'Dez Green is an athlete playing tight end, if ever there was one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but yes, absolutely. As we discussed in previous podcasts, basketball player first and then football player, and he's going to be, again, excuse the expression, but he's probably going to be hell on wheels.
Yeah, he can run. He's got an incredible catch radius, and so seeing him in some ways that kind of give him space to work, routes like that, I think will be fascinating. There could be a lot of potential there as a freshman for him. And then Pimpton, if he can continue to develop those other parts of his game, because that was something Mike Denbrock, when we got to talk to him a few times last year, kind of hinted at, was that he needed to keep developing, but there was so much potential in there. I remember before Pimpton ever even got on campus, and we asked Mike Denbrock about him, he was saying along the lines of he just couldn't wait to start coaching him. And that maybe it was Brian Kelly or maybe it was Mike Denbrock. One of the two were saying they had never really seen a tight end with Pimpton's catch radius before. And so now that he is a year in the program, what can he start to do is one of those other things to keep an eye on this spring and into the rest of the offseason, because it could be an element of LSU's offense that could end up helping make it really productive and increase the ceiling on what's possible.
And that's a mouthful too, coming from Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock, who have had several first round tight ends or several NFL caliber tight ends. When they were at Notre Dame or wherever else they were, at Cincinnati, obviously Travis Kelce and places like that. So it's something to continue to watch if you're an LSU fan.
Don't you love hearing parents Wilson say things like catch radius and stuff like that?
Well, of course, yeah.
We've got people,
high school quarterback.
We
He
got
knows what
people
he's
on
talking
this.
about.
Oh God,
we got people on this staff. Wilson really knows football, and Cookie Riley really knows baseball, and Sheldon and Reed really know basketball, and
We're professionals.
we're just going to spend the rest of the podcast giving each other pats on the back.
And
That's right.
I'm like the warm up comedian, before the main act.
That's what
I do.
Look, hey, this is why everybody has come to the Advocate for years and years and years. We're known as the number one destination for all things LSU football and LSU sports, for that matter. LSU baseball, men's basketball, gymnastics, softball, everything else under the sun. So if you would, please subscribe to The Advocate. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And stay up to date with all these sports, which are all going to be getting underway. We'll have every sport going on underneath the sun, if you count spring football, here in a short minute. So the LSU newsletter is the best way to stay up to date on all those things. You get it delivered straight to your inbox, to your desktop, to your phone. It's a daily newsletter, but Rab personally handles that 3 times a week. So please support your local journalist. Go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter and sign up for the LSU newsletter and get that delivered to you daily. We are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. So please subscribe to that YouTube channel. You can catch us there live. If you don't catch us there live, you can catch us there after the fact. And of course, we are also, if you don't catch us there, we are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. One thing we have not, we have not gotten all the way into, certainly. We've not touched on the offensive line, which is going to be largely intact. But also, let's start with Garrett Nussmeier. Hey, look, all eyes on Nuss, right? Everybody's going to be aboard the Nuss bus. They certainly, if you're an LSU football fan, you feel great about what he showed you there in the closing minutes of the ReliaQuest Bowl against the Badgers. 58.9% career passing, 1,720 yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And this is the moment he's been waiting for, and this is the moment that LSU has sort of groomed him for. He is QB1 and expected to be QB number 1, and no doubt about that. So what are we looking for from him in the spring? What do you hope to see from him?
It's interesting because we're talking about this is a moment that kind of started in December.
It did,
with Jaden Daniels opting out of the bowl game. Then at that point it was Garrett's time, and so we've already seen a glimpse of him in the bowl game, and we saw there was a lot of good things that came out of that. And obviously everyone's going to remember the 98-yard drive to win it more than anything else, and rightfully so. But there was also moments in that game where you could see that he was starting for the first time. And so in the spring, what you want to think to get out of Garrett is continued development in the areas in which he needs to improve. And those are a little bit more subtle. Some of it is that and I say that for a couple of reasons. One, his game is at a pretty good point, I think, from what we saw in the ReliaQuest Bowl. But it also, we haven't seen a ton of him play. Whereas, with Jaden coming out of last year, you'd had a whole season where you could tell, there were some very clearly identifiable things that the public could see, like the downfield passing game. Right. So, it'll be interesting to hear from LSU's coaches as we get into spring ball, and from probably Garrett himself as well, what he thinks he needs to continue to get better at. From what we saw in the bowl game, I would think that it is probably continue to sharpen his decision making.
Yep.
That's something that during his career early on was kind of a potential weakness. I think it got a lot better during the bowl game, but continue to get better there so that you cut down on potential turnovers. Overall management of the offense, and also building chemistry with these receivers. I mean, LSU, he's not going to just have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas to be throwing to. Kyron Lacey is back, but there's some new transfers in there who are probably going to be in line for quite a bit of playing time. And so the thing is, I kind of want to, that you won't necessarily see on the field from Garrett, but that we need to kind of hear about happening maybe in the locker room and behind the scenes, is really asserting himself as the leader that is QB1. Garrett is already one of LSU's SWAT team leaders. He has been for a while. He carries that kind of persona anyway, but that's something that needs to go on throughout the offseason, is asserting himself in that leadership role to be able to control this offense, because everybody needs to needs to be able to and want to rally behind him.
Reset for everybody what the SWAT team leader means, for those who either don't know or have since forgotten what the SWAT team is.
It's LSU's sort of off-season program, spring, summer workout accountability teams.
Yep.
And they are there's 10 leaders of them. LSU this year actually has every team has a co-leaders. And so I guess there's maybe 20 SWAT team leaders, and they get to draft everyone who's on the team. And it's their responsibility to kind of keep everybody in line. And the whole idea is to foster accountability within the program.
Mm-hmm. So we believe that we certainly believe that obviously Garrett Nussmeier is going to be, he's going to, just as you say, he's going to have to build a rapport though with some of these receivers. It goes without saying, obviously, that Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors are not going to be back. But in addition to that, it's not just a matter of those two primetime players leaving, but the at least two players who you assume are going to be main players, key players as wide receivers who have not been in this program before, and Xavier Thomas and CJ Daniels as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those were two of the biggest additions that LSU made this offseason. These are guys who have a lot of experience, a lot more than LSU had on the roster at receiver. CJ Daniels last year, I think, was 55 catches for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns.
Yep, at Liberty.
At Liberty last year. And then Xavier Thomas had, I think, 40 catches for around 500 yards at Mississippi State. And they're different kinds of receivers. CJ Daniels is more of your deep threat. He's 6'2", a little bit of a bigger body, whereas Xavier Thomas projects as a little bit maybe more of a slot guy. Now, CJ Daniels, from what I understand, and this is modern football, I don't think LSU is just going to like leave him out on the outside.
Right.
He'll probably get moved around the formation if he's capable of handling it and understanding those positions throughout the offense. It would be to his benefit and help LSU if he can, because then matching up against you becomes much more difficult. But those two, when I look at it, I think that they're probably. I'm penciling them in as starters, or at least going into the spring.
And that's why LSU brought them in.
Yeah,
they didn't bring them in to be backups.
Yeah, and I mean LSU's got a lot of other receivers. Kyron Lacey's coming back, but if I was to look at the offense on day one, I would expect to probably, of spring ball, I would expect to probably see Kyron Lacey, Xavier Thomas, and CJ Daniels out there with their first team offense. If there's an exception to that, then I think Chris Hilton's in the lineup because he had a pretty strong bowl game. He was finally healthy all year last year, and he's going to have a really good chance.
You as this year's Brian Thomas going into it a little bit?
Not quite the same, because Brian had played a lot more than Chris had during his career. They're also just different players. Chris isn't as tall as Brian is, but maybe he could be capable. He's one of those potential breakout candidates.
That's what I mean in terms of this could be his time to really contribute.
Yeah, this could be. I mean, he, like we said, was the thing about the start of his career is he was injured for like 2 years in a row. He was never really able to get off the ground, in terms of like launching his career, and he was sort of stuck on the launch pad for a couple of years, really. And then last year he was finally healthy, but again overshadowed by these two fantastic Biletnikoff semifinalists, and
then ended up getting hurt during the season too. A little bit. Chris Hilton.
Trying to remember when that was.
Sure. He wound up being sort of beat up at the end of the Ole Miss game, and then.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He kind of hurt his maybe his foot or like ankle area. That's right. On that last. On the last play. Thank you for reminding us, Perryn. But he obviously was able to come back and kind of have at least a somewhat full season.
He had his moments, absolutely,
and be able to assert himself as maybe put himself in that mix for more playing time this year. So he could be a breakout candidate for sure.
If you had to guess right now, you think CJ Daniels will wind up being their leading receiver?
Ooh. Oh, if I had to guess at the exact moment, I mean, I would say yes at this moment because he had an 1,000-yard season last year.
Yeah.
He's done it before. So, if you're basing it off of past production to try to predict future results, then, I would say yes. But it's going to be tough because I would want you to ask me that again in preseason camp once we've seen him and everybody else practice a little bit more. So write that down. Let's come back to that in preseason camp when we maybe make some of those predictions, because, Kyron Lacey had a really strong second half of the season, and he'd be another candidate for that. And LSU's got some other receivers who got to go out and prove themselves,
Going back to Nussmeier, I've asked this of other media colleagues, longer term people. No knock on Wilson. You haven't been here for six years. I said, I asked somebody else, do you feel as good about LSU at quarterback with Garrett Nussmeier going into the next season as you did about LSU in 2007 going into the season with Matt Flynn replacing Jamarcus Russell? And I did not. But the ReliaQuest Bowl changed my mind a little bit. He got through for 395 yards against a solid, not a great team by any means, but a solid defensive team, a top 20, top 25 defensive team. And he led them on a 98-yard drive at the end of the game against said defense. And that was pretty impressive. That was pretty impressive. So I think I feel a little bit better about it because I'm reminded of that situation. Jamarcus, of course, was not the Heisman winner, but he was the number one draft pick overall. And then Flynn had bided his time, waited for his turn to play, and then, of course, led them to the national championship. And I'm not putting that pressure on Garrett Nussmeier, but he's got the skills. He's got a similar talent level to me. And can he be that guy? Can he be that leader? As it's not just about throwing the ball and checking to the right place. It's about leading the team. That's, to me, has always been one of Joe Burrow's greatest attributes. Come on, you SOBs, let's go win some games. And they followed him, and
just
you
never
want
being
that.
never being beaten in terms of up here. Never being beaten in terms like Joe Burrow was never going to take an unwise gamble on a throw that shouldn't have been made or something like that. He always made the right decision, or overwhelmingly made the right decisions more often.
Garrett's got a lot of faith in that arm now.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Well, that's what I didn't mention when you asked me like what he needs to get out of his spring. Like I didn't really mention anything about arm talent because it's all
got
there.
that in spades.
He's got all the tools.
Yes.
It's just a matter of kind of putting all those pieces together to continue to get better.
Right, that's right. One thing before we wrap up, we ought to discuss the offensive line. Rab, I will put this to you since you've obviously been watching LSU football since 1831.
Leather helmet days.
Yes,
I know.
No, it's listen. How much of a luxury is it to have 4 of your 5 presumed returning starters back on the offensive line? Now, I grant you, center is a big. That's an important position, a position of responsibility. But how big is it to be able to have, in all likelihood, 4 of your 5 returning offensive linemen back, in addition to sort of reinforcements that are coming in this recruiting class?
Yeah, I mean they've obviously made offensive line a huge priority. This is Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is no fool when
He's
he comes
a line of scrimmage coach.
He's a line of scrimmage coach, and like they as I said, they got a big problem at defensive tackle that they have to solve. But if they can solve it, this goes a long way to making you a playoff team. As I've said before, this is the pass-fail grade. You're in the playoff.
It's 12 teams now. That's right.
It's 12 teams. You got to be in that group, or people are not going to think you had a good season. Your fans are not going to be happy. So this goes a long way to helping you get there. I don't think LSU's there yet, but this goes a long way to helping you get there. Is being very solid and deep and talented on the offensive line. It was just a couple of years ago, his first year, where you got starting freshman tackles.
That's right.
They're really this is really a difficult situation, and now Campbell and Jones are veterans, and you have other veterans on the line with Miles Frazier and Dellinger, and you have depth, and they're recruiting more depth. It's it's not the sexiest part of college football,
but it's an absolute must.
Absolute must, and I think LSU's in a great trend, a great place with that situation on the offensive line. This team's, to me, Wilson, you've given it thought about it this kind of way with the tight ends we're talking about in the offensive line. This seems like this is the kind of team Brian Kelly wants to have, the kind of offense he wants to be
potentially in terms of like you're talking about where your strengths are and that kind of thing. It does kind of line up with his history, having productive and strong offensive lines and being able to use your tight ends in the passing game and having that be a strength of the offense. Yeah, we saw that throughout his Notre Dame days, and it's something that LSU has kind of been getting to the last few years. And I think part of the reason that he came to LSU was he's always had that as a part of his team, but now when you come to LSU, you have that wide receiver talent that is often so readily available, and that kind of helps round out the offense and expand it. And I think that is what they've been trying to. Obviously, they had it last year. I mean, gosh, we're talking about what they want to get to. Last year, they had the number 1 offense in the country. So it's not like they're trying to really get to anything else. But in terms of sort of ideology, they've been trying to build up on the offensive line over the last few years, and they've gotten there. Last year was a Joe Moore Award finalist, and bringing so many guys back that it is an obvious strength of this group and something that they can rely on. We're talking about, and we've sort of touched on it but haven't gotten into it, in the spring. On the offensive side, you've got position battles at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. You've got sort of a situation at running back. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily position battle, but like certainly something to keep an eye on. And you've got a brand new quarterback, and you've got new offensive sort of minds in charge. But when you look at the offensive line, that you have something you can lean on. And that is, when you talk about luxury, that is luxury. The only thing that's getting changed out is DJ Chester will be your presumptive center after Charles Turner moved on to the NFL. And Charles Turner did a good job the last 2 years. And we'll see exactly what DJ can do. That's something else to keep an eye on in spring practice, just to see.
Got to play.
He came in the Missouri game and really stabilized things when he came in and replaced Marlon Martinez. And so, I don't think the level of concern is that high replacing Charles Turner and bringing in DJ Chester, but he is going to be a first-time starter.
Right. The one, you're absolutely right. They were the number 1 offense in the country last year, so it's like you're just trying to sustain. You're not trying to improve on anything. But the one thing they didn't do that was really great was when they had to line up and it was short yardage and power for that 1 yard. They weren't super great at that.
Yeah.
I think this team probably will be better if, like I said, the running back situation gets figured out. I think this team will probably be better at that.
And that's why I think part of why we sort of spend a good bit of time kind of harping on the run game and why they need to be able to get more out of the run game is because, especially when you think back to the Florida State game, and obviously it changed a lot since then, but they had a lot of short yardage situations that they weren't able to pick up. And constantly like on the goal line, they had some ups and downs there on the goal line. And that is something they're going to be able to get more out of on this offensive line. And maybe it is something that comes from, just doing different things offensively anyway. Garrett Nussmeier is more likely to probably go under center than Jaden was. Jaden it wasn't his favorite thing to do. And so, I would think that was conversations they had as an entire offense that they were mostly going to operate out of the shotgun, which they pretty much always did. I think that we'll maybe see a little bit more of that power run game in some degrees. And it's going to be just really interesting in the spring to learn about and maybe get to see, depending on how much LSU opens up practice, what that starts to look like.
And what are you going to need? What are you going to need if you're in a playoff game and you're up by 5 with 4 minutes left to play? That's what you're going to need.
Yeah. So. And it will be in a situation like that. It will rest on, in all likelihood, it will rest on the offensive line and whether they can get the job done at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage. Those are all things. Before we get to the playoff, we are getting way ahead of ourselves. Go ahead.
I was going to say before we got out of here, I feel like we've touched on a lot of them, but I'm curious, Rab and Perryn, what your answers would be if you had to go into spring ball. What are the 3 players on the offensive side you were like most intrigued to watch?
Is Cortez Green in the spring?
No, he gets in summer.
All right. Like I said, Kaleb Jackson always for sure. CJ Daniels, if he asserts himself as like, okay, he's you can say, oh, he's likely to be the guy, going into the season. And I would say, gotta say one of the tight ends. I want to say Kamorian Pimpton. Because, like you said, he was just such a physical specimen that they got to find ways to utilize his talents this year.
That's a good list.
Pimpton, I would certainly. There's a lot of intrigue as it relates to if he can sort of make good on all the potential, all the skills he's got. That's a really intriguing choice. I would say, Rab. I would say DJ Chester for all the reasons we're talking about. If he comes in and solidify, if he can handle that center position, handle all the calls, all the checks, all that stuff. Then the offensive line is presumably good as gold, and now you've got a reason to believe that you have given not only the skill players but Garrett Nussmeier himself, every opportunity to be able to succeed. Kaleb Jackson, of course, is the highlight reel waiting to happen. Brian Kelly, that would be another choice of mine. Brian Kelly, of course, has said over and over again about how look, he is young in the game of football, and so has a lot to learn there. But if he, listen, man, everybody has seen his sort of highlight reel. When everybody, if and when he puts it together, it's something to behold. Josh Williams is a known commodity. I guess I just sort of love everything Josh Williams stands for. He's given you he's going to give you everything he's got. He's as dependable can be. But I do agree with you in the sense that CJ Daniels, I think, is really, really interesting. If he winds up being wide receiver number 1, you've got – and in addition to Xavier Thomas, you've got young players with almost unlimited potential, unlimited skills behind him. Chris Hilton, Shelton Sampson, all these guys. And so that gives you, now all of a sudden you're talking about strong tight ends, strong running backs, your offensive line is set. And so now if you've got CJ Daniels as a number 1 wide receiver, then you ought to feel really, really, really good about your offense. And maybe, it would be foolish to think that any offense is going to be as productive as the offense that we just saw in 2023 at LSU. But all of a sudden you're talking about, man, you lost your Heisman Trophy winner and you've got almost as much skill coming back. Different players, obviously, but almost as much skill coming back and a potential to be pretty doggone explosive. That's something to watch. That's something to behold. And, of course, we'll get into the defense in a different podcast. But, if the defense can just get from really, really, really below average to just close to average, now you're talking about a complete program. So
I think I'll just add a couple names to that. Just guys further down the depth chart, maybe at least going into the spring, who I think I'm interested to watch. Shelton Sampson, who you mentioned a second ago, just because that's a kind of like a 5-star type receiver. What can he start to do in year 2? Tyree Adams, offensive tackle, who we've heard some good buzz about during winter workouts. He won Freak of the Week once from their offseason training program. And especially after Lance Hurd left, who's your sort of top backup tackle in case, you need someone to come in? I'm interested to see how he is developed. Not a guy who played a lot last year. And then AJ Swan, who we have not mentioned, but the transfer quarterback from Vanderbilt. Not to suggest that really at this point that, can he push Garrett is the question. Not to suggest that, he's going to unseat Garrett, but can he make it a competition is going to be something else to keep an eye on this spring.
Or do you feel good about him? The sort of the rule of thumb that I was, at least in terms of the NFL, I don't know why. I mean, it could just as easily apply to college football as well, but sort of the rule of thumb that I've always had about backup quarterbacks in the NFL is if you have your number one quarterback who goes down for 4 games, can your backup quarterback get you to 2-2 in those 4 games that he's missing? Now, it's a different deal in college, but maybe it's not now with the 12-team playoff. Maybe you sort of have that, ability to have.
I mean, more 3-1, but I understand where you're going with that.
Maybe you go 3-1 or something like that, but just so
to get you through without crippling.
Right. To what you're speaking toward, Wilson, which is to say now, there's a reason you brought on AJ Swan to begin with, as an experienced quarterback in the SEC, albeit at Vanderbilt. Is he enough to sort of get you by? And can he be that guy? Can he show in spring practice that he can be that guy to sort of hold the fort should something happen to Garrett Nussmeier? So, yes, that's all interesting. All worthwhile topics. They're all worthwhile topics as we go into spring practice, as we follow up with spring ball, as we get into maybe some more women's basketball, men's basketball, and of course softball and gymnastics. It's spring. All these sports are going on. They're all here. We're all here for it. That's what we do at The Advocate. You know where to find us at The Advocate. That's theadvocate.com. You can subscribe at theadvocate.com/subscribe. You stay up to date with all of our stuff with the LSU newsletter. Rab handles it. Again, Rab handles that 3 times a week personally, but it's a daily newsletter. You get it delivered straight to your inbox every single day. To sign up for that, if you haven't already, please go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday here with the LSU Sports Insider on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever the finer podcasts are found. But probably more importantly, we're here on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. The YouTube channel there. You can find us there live. If you don't find us there live and watch live, you can find us after the fact on that same channel. So please subscribe to that channel. And as always, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. We're in for a fun spring. Baseball, spring football, men's basketball, women's basketball. Looks like we've got a lot to talk about to begin with. And in addition to gymnastics, which is on quite a tear to begin with already.
Big meet Friday night at Florida.
A big meet Friday night, and they're kind of coming down the stretch here within the next month and a half. Yep. We'll see if they can compete for a national championship. So for Scott Rabalais, for Wilson Alexander, for Robert Young behind the glass, my name is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.